podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, and I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to Haway The Podcast from Local Report. And I'm not sure you've had the chance to listen yet, but hot off the heels of our Player of the Year podcast for the 2024-25 season, we go straight into the Young Player of the Year. And as we mentioned on that pod, because our squad is so young, we made the rule that the winner of this has to be under 21 on the day of the playoff final. So we ended up with a short list of 4 for this one. And we ended up with Joe Bellingham, Chris Rigg, Tommy Watson and Eliza Mayenda. And we'll see if this is easy as the Player of the Year was to come to a consensus. But I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen what people have picked. But we'll get into it because first up today, and there is a chance he might have to dash at some point because he's off to see Kylie. But I should feel so lucky that he's with us today. We've got Brett with us. All right, Matt?
Morning, mate. I was waiting for the very first Kylie Minogue pun, and that was about 7 seconds, so well done.
Well, that's it. Looking forward to it, mate? A bit of Kylie?
Yeah, just to clarify, this is for my wife's Christmas present. That's the only reason why I'm going. I'm sure after a few drinks, I'll be doing the locomotion. Don't you worry.
That's it. Favourite album? Oh.
I don't know. I can have about 3
all on vinyl.
All from the early 90s. Hope she doesn't play any new stuff.
Well, we better get into it in case you've got to run for that train. Because secondly, all the way from the land of the Giants and fresh from playing Gulliver on stage, we have Bomber. All right, mate?
That's an introduction and a half, Chris. Yeah, hello, mate. You're right.
Well, I'm running out of things to say. Although we were sharing pictures the other day. We got the commentary notes from Clive Tilsley. We both purchased those, and they're cracking, aren't they?
Yeah, they're fantastic coming in. I did pay the little bit extra to have him sign the back, even though it's a complete waste of time because I put it in a frame and you can't see the back anyway. But I know it's there. And yeah, I've got that little artwork of the players running across to the corner flag after Watson scored as well. So those two are in frames on my wall at the minute. I'm just waiting for an away shirt to turn up in a couple of days' time, and I'll frame that, and that'll be my little homage to Wembley complete. So yeah, looking forward to it.
I think every Sunderland fan in the world is a little bit lighter in the pocket, one way or another, after all this, isn't it? But yeah, and last but certainly not least, fresh from not getting his way on the Player of the Year pod, so he'll have the bit between his teeth today. We have Gavin Henderson. All right, mate?
I am, mate. Very good, very good. I'm going to win today. I can feel it in my bones.
You're going to feel
it in competition,
bones,
Gav.
Right?
It is. Trust me.
It is now. He's lost one. Well, speaking of the Player of the Year, we did end up coming to a consensus that we had Trey Hume as our Player of the Year on that podcast. So I might as well get your views on it, Brett. I mean, would you have gone for Trey Hume? I know we had basically, I think Luke O'Nine was Gav's pick. I went for Dan Neil. I'm not sure if you would have had anyone else other than those three.
No, Trey Hume was my pick for it. As a right back myself, I absolutely love the bloke. At Sunderland, we've had some like really tough tackling right backs in our time. My first one was like John Kay, and then we had the Makins, Bardsleys, and Trey Hume's just another one on that list. For anyone else on that pitch, if a song comes up with anyone, if like the Mayenda song comes up, he could have done one of a few things. If Chris Riggs, he could have done one of a few things. If the crowd chants Hume, it's his opposition player is in a heap, crumpled, because he's just taken them out with like the hardest, fairest challenge you'll ever see. So yeah, 100% was what he was my Player of the Year.
Yeah, that's it. I think when Hume finishes, rather than, a bit like Chris Macon, rather than goals and stuff, we'll be thinking of tackles with Diaz and McLean and all of that, won't we? But it is strange, though, Brett, how we do have right backs. That's almost a Sunderland stereotypical right back, isn't it?
It is just a hard working, get stuck in, no nonsense. But as well, now I'm actually being a bit unfair to him because he can play a bit as well. He has got goals in his locker, so he's not just all about the tackles. He does play as well. So yeah, for me, he's the full mix. And I'm not surprised he didn't say yesterday there was like linking him with moves away. Like half our team moves away, so people will be looking at him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Bomber, for you, I mean, I mentioned the three that kind of we picked for our nominations, but obviously there was others on our shortlist. I mean, would you have ended up going for one of those?
So I went for Joe Bellingham for Player of the Year. I just think his impact in the team over the course of the season, I guess statistically, in terms of goals and assists, you probably wouldn't look at him and go, oh, he's had a stellar season. But his influence on the team, I think, is as great as, the likes of the Luke O'Niens in the squad. He missed, 6 or 7 games last season, and we didn't win a single one of them, which I think is testament to his influence on the team. And I think last season, I know we're talking about this season, but if you think about the season before as well, there was times where he was out the team. And Gav, you said it to me, we've said it to each other, like, oh, how much do we miss Job in that centre midfield? And I think that was the case also for this season when in the few games that he didn't play. So yeah, I think he was the outstanding choice for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see if that impacts your young player when we get into it. But we will get into that because we'll go through our shortlist again. And we've got Joe Bellingham, who Bomber's just mentioned. We've got Chris Rigg, we've got Tommy Watson, and we've got Eliza Mayenda. So we've got those 4 as a shortlist, and we'll start with potentially the hero of the season and the villain of the season in one, all rolled into one package. And I'll come to you first, Gav, with Tommy Watson, because he was kind of chomping at the bit for a good season or so. And we knew this lad was coming through, and we knew he had a lot of talent. Everyone was waiting for him to come through. When he started to get some games, we could see his talent. And then, of course, the move came along, and he went through that really strange period, and then came out, and he'll be forever remembered for taking us up to the Premier League. So, I mean, an absolutely bizarre career at Sunderland for how much he's actually played.
Yeah, and what a redemption arc, I guess. We were all resigned to him leaving when you look at January, Brighton, up until the very last seconds of that window, had tried to sign him. It didn't come off. Obviously, a deal was done at some point between January and April. And for him, I think it's obviously probably bittersweet because I would imagine deep down he's been at Sunderland his whole career since he was 5-year-old, even coming through the academy, and he would have wanted to have an impact on Sunderland. So in that period between sort of April and the end of the season, where he got a lot of stick, he wasn't really playing very much, and when he was playing them games at the end of the regular season, he played pretty poorly, if we're being honest. He was probably thinking, what a poor way to end my time with Sunderland, the club I love, the club I've grown up supporting. So to then send us to the Premier League with, probably the most important goal a Sunderland player has scored in many, many years, I think it's a nice way to end things off, because really, I didn't really like the way things played out between April and the end of the season with Watson. I think if we're being honest, it wasn't handled very well. I don't know who leaked it. I don't know how that story got out there, but it didn't do him any favours. So to basically rub all of our faces in, and everyone who was kind of sitting there after the Swansea game and the QPR game and saying, why the hell are we playing this kid? He just doesn't look interested. To then do what he did and sign off with the last kick of the ball he'll ever have in a Sunderland shirt by sending us back to the top flight. Outstanding. And you've got to give him credit. The finish was ridiculous in the final. But even going back a little bit more than that, the Stoke game when he got the 2 goals, Sheffield United away, which I would say was probably his best performance for us. Although he hasn't played very much, there have been some good performances in there. And I'm just excited to see what he does next. I think it's, if I was a Brighton fan, I would be looking at what he did in the final, and I'd be really, really pleased that we'd signed him. So for his sake, I think it's nice that it ended the way it did.
Yeah. I mean, Brett, we've got to remember how old he is. I mean, he just turned 19 back in April. And, he is on our list. He is on that list of 4. And obviously there's the high profile goal, and Gav's just touched on, that maybe, there's temptation to stick him on the list regardless of what season he has just for that moment. But the other thing we've got to think about is, that he only started 11 games this season, had 10 appearances as sub, had a period out, injured, and then it was all a bit weird towards the end. So, that is it fair to have him on the list, even, because of that big moment? I mean, how much has he actually contributed to the season as a whole? I know he got us up because of the goal, but over that 49 games, if you include the playoffs.
No, it is a funny one, because if we were any other club, or if he played for any other club, as a youngster, as I say, for 19 years old, playing 20 games, you'd probably win young player of the season for most clubs. It's just unfortunate for him that between the four players we've got on our list, I think they've made 150 odd appearances between them. So, anywhere else, he actually probably would win it, even by what he has done. It's a shame, it's a shame that he got the injury that kept him out for so long, because he had looked really good at that point. Then a couple of games, as Gav mentioned, the Sheffield United game, the 2 goals at Stoke, was brilliant. Then he got the injury. Then it came it didn't help anybody that actually been announced for the actual transfer. It was such a bizarre thing. Obviously, it's been leaked for some reason, but it didn't help him, didn't help the club. So yeah, he's not going to be my player of the year, I'm honest, for young player of the year, based on what he's done, because of the others have done a much bigger part for this season. That one moment though will go down in history. It's going to be, you talk about, Montgomery save, Portfield's goal, even in our lifetimes, Gordon Armstrong's header, whatever. He has cemented himself in absolute history of Sunderland Association Football Club. Is he player of the year? Well, probably not. But yeah, what an absolute, he's left on such a high, which is good for him, as I say. And as Gav has mentioned, he was the villain those last 10 games that he was playing. It didn't look like he wanted to be there, but bloody hell. When he's running off, ripping that shirt off, he wanted to be there just in that moment. So yeah, absolute legend moment, but yeah, not he can't be player of the season, surely.
Yeah. Well, it'll probably come as no surprise that none of us have picked Tommy Watson as our player of the year. But Bomber, I mean, in terms of, let's just take, obviously the goal is huge, but let's take that kind of goal out and talk about kind of how good a player he is, because again, I talked about how many games he started and came on a sub. And the thing, in terms of the starting 11, he didn't appear until the 6th of November against Preston in the starting 11.
Yeah, and that's partly the reason why he don't want to be but maybe nowhere near player of the season for me. Just because he's not played enough minutes. He probably played more minutes in the games when everybody was booing him than he did for the rest of the season combined. And he was that knee injury for quite a significant time. And you're right, he didn't start the season. We were 5 or 6 games in before he even made an appearance. And even then it was like 5 minutes off the bench, 6 minutes off the bench. He didn't play his first 90 till mid-November. And I think he only played maybe 5 or 6, lots of 90 minutes. So it's somebody who we were also excited about last season. And, there probably is a bit, maybe a little bit of recency bias given the absolute heroics and what he achieved, what he did for us at Wembley will go down in history and people will remember it for the rest of their lives. And I hope that's people's abiding memory of Tommy Watson rather than the games that happened before that. Similar reason being a choice for me, unfortunately.
Yeah. Just quickly on his move though, Bomber. There's, the reported 10 million, and like I said, only turned 19 back in April. And we've talked about how much football he's played. Is that a good price?
I think time will tell on that. I think it's difficult to say right at this moment because, the Tommy Watson we saw at the end of last season and the Tommy Watson, effectively that goal was worth 200 million, let's say, to us. So you could say we've got more than 10 million out of him and then deal. But again, I think we've mentioned a few times on a few podcasts that 10 million for a kid who is young, is still got a lot of developing to do, but is still a hell of a talent as we stand right now, seems a bit like Brighton have got a bit of a steal. Now, like I say, what he's done for us is worth way more than the million that Brighton will give us. But yeah, I do feel a little bit, I do feel a little bit shortchanged by that move, to be honest. And I'm wondering if he now feels not regret, but kind of like, I would have liked to have stayed and been a Premier League player with Sunderland having been his boyhood club. For all intents and purposes, that deal was done in January when nothing was certain. And let's be honest, nothing was certain in terms of what league we were playing in next season until the 5th minute of extra stoppage time in the final at Wembley. But I think a part of me thinks he might be looking back now and going, "Oh, do you know what? I'm happy with the move. Don't get me wrong, but I'd love to be a Premier League player with Sunderland." So yeah, there might be a little bit of resentment looking back, but it's what it is. Now it's done, signed, sealed, and he's had his social media introductions with Brighton. So no turning back now.
Yeah. Looking at his actual social media picture I saw online, he didn't look overly pleased to be holding the shirt up. I have to admit, I don't know whether they told him to smile or do a passport photo or whatever, but he didn't look overly chuffed. But yeah, we'll see how he does, because of course he'll be forever remembered for that moment at Wembley. Okay, so next on the list we'll go to Chris Rigg, Gav, who, I mean, absolutely ridiculous talent. And it's funny because I say to my lad who's coming up 12 years old, 3 years' time, he should be playing against Premier League clubs in the FA Cup. He doesn't believe us, but keep showing him Chris Rigg when he came on and kind of scored that goal that was disallowed. But ridiculous talent. And, considering how young he is, the worry is when you see someone like that, you think, oh, can they kind of go the course with a Saturday, Tuesday in the Championship where players are smashing into you and all this sort of stuff, and at a player so young. But he's quite often the ones putting the challenges in, and he's on lists of, French magazines, top kind of young players in Europe and all this sort of stuff. He's in those lists. I mean, we've got a ridiculous talent on our hands here, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think the fact that he was trusted to start in the final says a lot about not just the way the club have handled him, but how he's gained the trust of the coach over the season. Because it's all right being really talented, but you've got to back it up as well on the pitch. You've got to show commitment and training every day. You've got to be a good teammate. And I think it was Luke O'Nien said about when Chris Rigg speaks in the dressing room, everybody listens. He's not viewed as a 17-year-old. He's viewed as a member of the squad who's got an opinion on things. And I think the club deserves so much, not just for Chris Rigg, obviously, but they deserve so much credit for how they've handled some of these players. Because where else would he have got that responsibility? Where else would he have got those minutes? I don't think there would have been many clubs, even in the Championship, despite having, a lad with that amount of talent and a ridiculous prospect. I still think that a lot of football managers and a lot of sporting directors would be reluctant to give too many opportunities to a kid that young. But at the same time, as I said, he's really ran with it, and he's a credit to himself. He's a credit to his family that he's managed to solidify himself as a regular starter in the starting 11 of a team who've just been promoted to the Premier League at 17-year-old. It doesn't happen anymore, does it? It just doesn't. You're looking at across the spectrum of football, like other than maybe like Yamal at Barcelona and a handful of others. How many 17-year-olds are going to be playing top level football next season? So it's a testament to how talented he is. And I don't think he's been a standout performer necessarily this season. He hasn't gone out there and startled us with a string of really impressive performances. But I think the type of footballer that he is, he's worth his weight in gold because he puts himself about. He's not the biggest, and he will keep growing. He's 17, like I said. He's got another 3-4 years to keep growing if and we can bulk him out a bit and he sort of grows into his frame a bit more. That's to come. But he still carries himself like a big lad. And on top of that, I mean, he's got 2 brilliant feet and he can do anything with the ball. The sky's the limit for Chris Rigg. I'm again, like I said, on the Player of the Year pod, I'm just glad we were there for the journey with him. And I hope it carries on. I hope he's here for a long time. But given his rise, it would be difficult to see clubs not sniffing around him at some point soon. I think there's going to be a lot of them very, very interested to see how he copes playing Premier League football next season. In January could be very interesting with Chris Rigg, but I don't want to put too much of a downer on it. It's just I think it's a tick in the box for him, isn't it, that he's done so well at Sunderland, and I think next season he's going to get just as many chances playing Premier League football, and good on him. You know what I mean? Brilliant to see a young lad come through and get these chances.
Yeah, I mean, Brett, Gav's just talked about that trust. And Chris Rigg, I mean, it's ridiculous. I have to keep checking, actually, because I keep thinking it's wrong, but and I hope I need a second source really, because he turns 18 in June, which means if you think he turned 17 last June, and then if you look at the start of the season, Cardiff first day of the season, he starts off on the bench, comes on from the bench, and then he starts in 20 of the next 21 games, scoring 4 goals, and he just turned 17 in the Championship. I mean, and actually his performances in that bulk at the start of the season is probably one of the big reasons he's in our shortlist, because at the start of the season, those triangles he was doing with Patrick Roberts and how he was playing, I mean, he was one of our best players in that kind of opening half of the season.
He's just phenomenal. As I say, at 17 years old, he doesn't play like a 17-year-old. He doesn't act like a 17-year-old. He's got a real maturity about him. And you saw that, actually. The perfect case is that as the national anthem's going at Wembley, and Luke O'Nine's in tears almost, well up because of the passion that's going on. The player that puts his arm around Luke O'Nine is 17-year-old Chris Rigg. You know, to reassure like our captain or one of our senior players. You know, that says all about him, and that's where, as Gav said, Luke and I says players listen to him because he has got that maturity about him, and the sky is the limit. You know, it really is, and it is just frightening that the season he has had. I do think it's my biggest concern for him was burnout, because that is a lot. You know, he's played 47 games this season, but as you just said there, he was. Those 20 games in a row he played, he was trusted in the final. He was, he's just got the sky's the limit for him. And he's and again, another key point, he gets stuck in for his size. That tackle in the box at Wembley, phenomenal. He takes on players that, 5, 6, 7 stone heavier than him, and he'll stand up to them, So he's going to be a really good player. I think. Next summer will be my worry for once the year is out for him, in the Premier League. But I've got no doubts next season he's going to step up, and there'll be a lot of eyes on him. And let's not forget that goal against Middlesbrough. The composure to do that sort of thing. There's a tackle there, but there's Jesus Christ. There was, I say that Hume can tackle, but he can play. No, this kid can play, and there's just no fear to him. So yeah, he would be in any Premier League team would love to have him in the squad, but thankfully I don't believe every team would play him like we play him and play him so many games. I mean, he's just going to get better and better for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bomber, listening to Gavin Brett, you'd think Chris Rigg was nominee for Player of the Year, never mind Young Player of the Year, and he got 0 nominations for us for this award as well. And it's absolutely ridiculous when you think, like I said, just about to turn 18. But to play in the big games he's played in as well, the pressure of the Coventry semi-final, 2 legs, the game at Wembley, which he must have kind of been preparing his head for in terms of Patrick Roberts, will he, won't he, is he fit, how fit is he, is Mundell fit, so he was probably thinking, am I going to get this chance at Wembley? And he did, and he kind of played his part. But yeah, he did, I mean, we're talking about possibly one of the best young players in Europe, yet he didn't get any nominations from us for Young Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, for how much we're talking him up, and I'm about to do exactly the same. On reflection now, it does seem a bit ludicrous that he's got no nominations whatsoever. But he is, from our perspective anyway, he is a generational talent. There's so many parallels to him and Jordan Henderson's rise. In fact, he's probably doing it a bit earlier than Jordan Henderson did, but he's geared up to, he's broken through of us in the Championship. I hope that he continues on that good form in the Premier League and he can make that step up. I've got no doubts that he can, because, he's coming through for us and playing games. He played so many games for us this season, but it's not just the number of appearances he's made, it's the number of minutes he's getting in big games. Most teams where they've got 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they're thrown on for the last 20 minutes when their team's 2-0 up or the game doesn't mean anything. Chris Rigg's playing 90 minutes, like away at Millwall, away at Coventry. He's playing the 90 minutes against Middlesbrough. He's he's playing the vast majority of games against Burnley and Sheffield United and Leeds. And, these are big games, important games where everybody on the pitch is expected to do a job and is pressurised to do a job. And by and large, he's done it admirably. Gav mentioned right at the start when we started talking about him, about big Premier League clubs having a look at him and seeing what he can do in the Premier League. And I think that's bang on. There's been some newspaper reports about Man United having a look at him and West Ham having a look at him. They'll be looking at those first 6, 7, 8 games of the Premier League season. And regardless of our results, they'll be looking at his performances. We would do very well to keep hold of him in the midterm, let alone in the long term. But that said, for me, he doesn't get my nomination because I think he's still working out where his position is, what player is. He's played so many different roles in the team this season. He's played as a more defensive midfielder. He's played behind a striker. He's played out on the right wing. He's played, he's probably played 4 or 5 different roles within the course of the season. And whilst he's done all admirably, it kind of makes it hard, one, to pin him a position and then say that he excels in that position enough to be considered player of the season. And I just think whilst his influence off on a pitch is probably quite strong, we don't necessarily see it. That moment that Brett mentioned about when he had his arm around Luca 9 in the lineup, when Luca 9 was kind of like close to tears, we don't really see that side of him on the pitch so much. You see the passion and the blood and thunder and everything else. And I just think his influence on the game to game, is a little bit less than some of the other players in this group, and certainly the player that I've ended up picking. So yeah, fantastic talent. He's going to be, his career is going to shoot off to the moon. But for this season, whilst I think he's been brilliant, and I think he is a brilliant player, I would probably have him third, I'd say, in this list.
Yeah. Just quickly, Bomber, because you mentioned something there about, and it reminded me when you were talking about what I've been saying about Joe Bellingham, where last season I thought Joe Bellingham was finding himself and what type of player he was and what his best position was. Do you think that's almost what we've been doing with Chris Rigg, where we've been saying, you kind of play minutes and you find yourself and find what type of player or what positions you pick up? Because I can honestly see, as he moves forward, him being a real orthodox midfielder who can do a bit of everything. But do you think that's almost a bit of a strategy from like the powers that be at Sunderland with these young players, where they say just get minutes and we'll put you in, and eventually you'll find yourself?
Yeah, I think so. It's no coincidence, is it, that we've done it with Rigg, we've done it with Job. Job was having spells up front last season, but just in the roles that Rigg's playing, it's quite clear that his preference, and I think our preference for him, is for him to be a central player. But he's played like as that forward attacking midfielder. He's played as the holding midfielder. He's played in a 2 in midfield. But yeah, I think it would be easy for Regis Lebris to go, right, you're a holding midfielder, and that's where you're going to play. And then all of a sudden he's competing with Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham for a place in the team. But I think you're right. What he's done is he's going, I'm going to give you minutes where I can afford to put you in and where I think you can do a job. And by and large, that's been through the centre, but it's been, he's played 4 or 5 different roles through the middle, and he's been outright as well. Personally, I don't think he's anywhere near as effective out on the right-hand side, but he's gone out there and done a job. I think his career long-term is in the centre through the spine of the team. But you're absolutely right. At 17 years old, who knows exactly what sort of player you're going to be, whether you're going to be a box-to-box midfielder, whether you're going to be the type of person who's going to break it up and redistribute it, or drop in and take it off the centre-backs. He doesn't know. So he's probably, you're right, just playing wherever he can just to get minutes. And there'll come a point in the next year or 2, I'm sure, where he's thinking, right, this is my position, and I've got to be good enough to get into the team in that position, rather than just kind of be slotted in to get experience and get minutes.
Yeah, well, listening to you all speak, I was tempted to change my choice, but I've got the luxury of being allowed to think about it a little bit more, because I'm going to move on. And the next person we're going to speak about is another hero from Wembley, Gav, Eliza Mayenda. You could go through the Sunderland squad and talk about their journeys and their stories. I mean, we're like a bloody episode of X Factor, aren't we? Where We talk about where they've come from and all that sort of stuff. And in Mayenda's case, went to Hibs, didn't work out, and then he comes in this season, he ends up being an absolute hero. But, you know, and you hear about as well, I think Tony Mowbray has mentioned in interviews in the past just what a kind of person he is, what a kind of young lad he is. And the fact that he's come back from a loan move that didn't work out, and he's worked at his game because he is exponentially better player than the one that came to us. And just to see him the way he's developed this season's been fantastic. And we should say from the off, this was your choice for Young Player of the Year.
Yes, Elijah Mayenda I thought was the most obvious choice, although we've had some brilliant young players come through the team this season. I think nobody has hit the ground running as quickly as he has. You know, from the start of the season, when we didn't have any other option but to play him, really. You know, you think back to pre-season, there was only him and Hamir, I think, around the squad. And he kind of forced his way into those plans. I went to the very first pre-season game at South Shields where he started up front, and I wasn't expecting much. And we came away from that game. I know it's a pre-season game and it's just effectively a training exercise. But we came away from that and went, bloody hell, he's put some size on. He was chucking himself about. He was holding the ball up. And we were thinking, who's this? We haven't seen this lad for very long. And from that point, I thought, you know, Mayenda done fantastically well over the season. Started really well, as I said. Got them 2 goals against Sheff Wed. But I think to a degree, they did hold him back purposely. I think Isidore was the preferred choice, being the more experienced player. The fact that Isidore had a couple of good runs of scoring goals and stuff meant that Mayenda wasn't necessarily trusted in that sort of second third of the season as much as he probably would have wanted to have been. But I think just by pure virtue of being brilliant every time he went onto the pitch, he really forced himself into the team. And, you know, you look at the way the season ended, you wouldn't have not had him on the pitch, would you? Just because of how dangerous he is when he gets the ball. The rate of improvement, unbelievable. I've never seen a player overcome, you know, some of the chances that he missed around the turn of the year. He was getting slaughtered for by the fans, and the way that he turned that around to then go on to be, for me, and I don't say this lightly, I think one of the top 2 or 3 strikers in the Championship in terms of quality and ability. For me, by the end of the season, that's where he was. Sky's the limit for Elijah Mayenda. There isn't another striker in the Premier League that I can think of who does what he does when he can just turn on a sixpence and run 20, 30 yards with a ball and really put defences on the back foot. Very, very unique footballer, and I'm just excited to see that translated into the Premier League. But if just purely talking about this season gone, I think if he hadn't been held back so much, he would have got into 20 goals. I think he would have. He hasn't started that many games, really, when you compare it to some of the other players around the squad. And yeah, just an outstanding talent, and I'm really, really excited to see what he can do going forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to you, Brett, in a second, because Bomber, he was also your pick for Young Player of the Year. And as Gav said he came out the traps at the start of the season, and he got that brace against Sheffield Wednesday in the second game of the season, and he started the first 6. And then he was out for 6 games. He picked up a knock. But then after that, he got that brace against Sheffield Wednesday, but that was it until the 1st of January. And that was his next goal was against Sheffield United on New Year's Day. And don't get me wrong, I agree with Gav that, you know, he was holding the line and he was working hard. And he was getting us up the pitch in those times where we were kind of under pressure and things like that. And Gav mentioned the games, started 20, came off the bench 15 times. But if you just look at games started, 20 games started and 9 goals this season. And his season's been a bit stop-start. I mean, still a brilliant season for someone who's just turned 20 in May.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And, you know, Elijah Mayenda gets the nod for me for pretty much the same reason that Chris Rigg didn't, in that, you know, in terms of influence on a game, he whether he's coming off the bench or whether he's starting, he's scoring important goals that give us points on the board. And even when he's not scoring goals, like Gavin yourself said, he's helping getting us up the pitch. He's relieving pressure from the defence and from the holding midfield. He took a while to come back from his muscle injury. I think he he had a relatively good start. And like Gav said, we had no choice really but to play him. I personally think that we probably wouldn't have played him as much if we didn't have to, and probably used him a little bit less in the same way that we have done with keeping back some of the other younger players. But his influence on the game and his ability to score goals as we turned the year, he just grew and grew and grew in confidence, and his influence on individual games, game to game, just grew and grew and grew. And if you think about the goals that he scored, he scored at home against Sheffield United. He scored the winner at Derby. He scored, obviously, I don't even need to mention his influence on all three playoff games. Both semi-finals and the final, with goals, with assists. And for me, it's just his, seemingly out of nowhere, he's just turned into one of the most probably hottest prospects, certainly in Spain. They're talking about getting him into the senior squad sooner rather than later. And the lad's only played twice for the 21s recently, or the 20s. And I think a lot of big clubs are now starting to stand up and notice him and take a look at him. But for me, the reason he gets my nod is the Eliza Mayenda we saw struggling to get a game for Hibs versus the Eliza Mayenda that scored the equaliser at Wembley are two completely different players. And if you were just watching clips from both, you wouldn't believe that it was the same player. And his influence over the course of the season, his return from adversity and from relatively, it's not an insignificant time to be out with that sort of injury, particularly a muscle one, because you've got the chance that it'll reoccur and everything else. And, he wasn't really playing. He was being eased back into the team. But then once you got to Christmas and beyond, he just ran away with it. And again, just to echo what Gav was saying, there's not a player in the top two divisions, I think, that can do what he does in terms of back to goal, turn a man, have the strength to hold them off, and then also have the pace to get away from them once they've turned them as well. It's obviously going to be a different prospect next season against Premier League level defenders and international level defenders. But, if he continues on the same trajectory as he had this season, he'll be a Premier League player or, a big 5 league player for years to come, regardless of whether it's with us or not. But yeah, he was clear favourite for me and a clear choice.
Wow, clear choice, Brett. Because obviously he wasn't your pick, and we'll come on to your pick last of all. But Bomber did emphasise, and Gav mentioned it as well, considering, like I said, 20 starts this season, 15 from the bench. I was just looking, he started 3 games between the 17th of January and the 21st of April by my reckoning, and then started the last 4, including, QPR and the 3 playoff games. So it ties into that kind of theory that Gav's talking about, that we held him back, and there's those important games as soon as, it kind of mattered at the end, he came straight in. But obviously it wasn't your pick, Brett, but what did you see about in terms of his impact, considering the games that we've said he's been involved in?
Yeah, you're right. So he wasn't my pick for player of the season. Had this been a under-12s team and there was a category for most improved, 100% he would get my vote for that. He has had a really good season. Now, the only reason why he didn't get my vote was because I kind of looked at it as the season as a whole. And as we've mentioned already, that he started really, really well, obviously getting the goals, the 2 goals early, and then against Sheffield Wednesday. It's a shame he couldn't just play Sheffield teams the whole time. I think 5 of his goals were against them this season. The injury, I thought, obviously put him back, and then also bringing Isidore in as well. I actually think it hampered him a little bit, where he was then no longer the focus up front. What, though, the lad has shown is a hell of a lot of resilience this season. We've literally had, obviously, there was quite high-profile misses with Stoke and Blackburn that he had, and then, but to finish the season he did, literally, when he got that ball at Wembley, I think every single one of us thought, this is going in the back of the net. So, yeah, he's had a really, really good season. And again, if he was at another club, he would have got Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year easily for me. So I just felt I had to look at it over the season as a whole, and I just thought there was that period where he missed out and then he didn't quite get back up to speed. You say the tail end of 2024, 2025. I say he's really ramped up. So that was the only reason why. So it's purely, he's had a great season, but I just looked at it as the season as a whole, as opposed to the tail end. But for me, he is the most improved player in our squad.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick with you, Brett, because the next player you've agreed with me, because I've got Joe Bellingham as my young player of the year, and he was on our shortlist for player of the year as well. And I kind of considered him for that. I went for Dan Neil in the end, but I think those two have been the linchpins in the middle of the park for us. I think you touched on it earlier, that how important he is when he's been in the side, and when he comes out the side, you really notice. But I think he was a nomination for full player of the year. And I think at my reckoning, 4 goals I think he's got. And I think he started 42 games for the club this season. But we look at the other players, and we'll look at Chris Rigg, how many games he's played. Lots of games. I think he'd started 37 games, something like that. We talked about Mayende, yes, the impact, the goals, but talked about 20 starts this season. And we talked about Tommy Watson as well, who'd only played a handful of games, 10 starts, I think. But Joe Bellingham, he's been almost, you forget that he's a young player. I think with the likes of Chris Rigg, the likes of Eliza Mayenda, the likes of Tommy Watson, you think, yeah, those are the young players of the team. Joe Bellingham this season has acted like and played like, for me, one of the senior members of the team. You would think if you saw Sunderland for the first time, Brett, I would think Joe Bellingham's 25, 26-year-old, and he's been playing in that midfield for 5 or 6 years. I mean, he slotted in alongside Dan Neil. Like, they look like they've been playing alongside each other for years. But it was Joe Bellingham was my pick for player of the year, and you picked him as well, Brett.
Yeah, I did. And I think one of the keys for him is actually when those, you say he's not missed many games, but when he has been out of the team, I think we do notice it. I know it was mentioned on the Play of the Year pod where we didn't win any games when he wasn't in the team. And it does, he's obviously, we know full well, the name is going to be, it means he's going to have comparisons with his brother. They're not the same player whatsoever. You could actually play him in the same team quite easily because he does all the work that you don't see. He didn't get many assists. I think he only got like 3 assists this season. But he's almost like I think Gav used, if I can't remember what your phrase you use, is like the break-up play, or, he breaks the play up. So
breaker-upper was the phrase.
Breaker-upper, that was it. He's got good breakability. And that's what he does. And I think a lot of people don't think that of him. And they think he's going to be getting, obviously he's got a great goal against Derby, but they think that's the sort of thing they expect from him. But he's just not that kind of player. But he just keeps everything ticking over. And as I said, the reason I didn't vote for Mayenda was because of, I didn't think he'd done it enough over the season. I just thought Bellingham had done it enough all season and playing that role. He scored a couple of goals. Obviously, the goal against Norwich when he gets it at the far post, cuts inside and whips it in. Great player. Obviously, it looks like now we're not going to have him next season, which is, would be a great shame. So I'd have loved to see what he could do in the Premier League. But, he's just an all-rounder for me. There was nothing really like fancy, but then over the minute he'll do a quick turn or a nutmeg and he'll take 3 players completely out of the game. But then all these other little things where you say just kept everything ticking over, which is that's where I got my vote. But I say it's just going to be a shame we're not going to have him much longer.
Yeah, and I'll come back to you, Bomber, because I've got a couple of questions for you on your picks. But Gav, you did go for Mayenda, but as we said on the player of the season pod, and Brett's just picked up on it there. The games that Job missed. In November there was 3. We drew with Preston, drew with Coventry, drew with Millwall. And then by my reckoning, he missed Watford in February, where we drew against Watford. And then in April, he missed the Norwich draw away from home and the Swansea defeat at home. And we've talked about how kind of important he is in that midfield. But he wasn't your young player of the year, Gav.
No, what? Again, a bit like yesterday, you could flip a coin with some of these choices. But with Job, I think, for me, I was looking more at like important moments, which is the flip of what I said about 09 when I picked him for player of the season. I was talking about his consistency over the season. Whereas with this one, I just think the Job is already a very good player. And I think he's improved a lot. I mean, he was a totally different player than the one we saw last year. But we'll get on to my choice in a second, so I don't want to talk too much about specifically my ender. But I think with Job, whilst I think he's had a very, very good season, and he has, there's moments where I think he hasn't shone as much as he possibly could have in games. I think I want to see more goals from him, which is what I mentioned yesterday. I think he's become a little bit too reserved around the box, which I think as he grows as a player, he's got to add to that, and he will, because he's still young and improving. But I think he was more willing to take opportunities on last season than he was this season in terms of being around the box and shooting and things. And yeah, for me, I would prefer to pick my ender on this occasion for the reasons I'll get on to. But yeah, Job for me just misses out in close second.
Yeah. Well, I mean, go on. I mean, in terms of emphasising why you've picked my ender, I mean, is it purely because of those big goals? And what specifically has he got? Because, like you say, he's played about half the games of Bellingham. Yeah. So are you just going on those specific moments?
I guess there's no real criteria for what, other than the fact that they've got to be under the age of 21. Now, we didn't have any real criteria set for young player, but I think for me, judging a young player is a little bit different to judging your player of the year. And I'm not just going on like who's necessarily been the best, because I think, again, it's very close. I think the rate of improvement in my ender over the season makes him a better choice for young player of the year. I think he's gone from being an incredibly talented raw player to, as I said before, one of the best strikers in the league by far for me. I just think he's an outstanding footballer. And for me, it's the rate of improvement over a short space. If you look back, we're in June now, 6 months ago, Eliza Mayenda was not anywhere near the player who ended the season. And I know we're not doing most improved, but I think that's got to be factored in. I think when you're talking about young players, you've got to factor in how much have they improved over the course of the season. And there hasn't been a more improved player than Mayenda. But I just think, I think it's very, very tight. Job's been brilliant. I just think we've had more moments from Mayenda, and he kind of became the crowd favourite, the story at the end of the season, didn't he? Everywhere you went in London over the playoff final weekend, you just heard people singing that song about Eliza Mayenda. Fans have really taken to him. And it's not just because he's came up with big moments in games and scored good goals. I think when we were talking yesterday, Chris, about Trey Hume, and like that's what we want to see in a Sunderland player. We want to see determination. We want to see aggression. We want to see big tackles and stuff. I think at the other end of the pitch, you want to see players like Mayenda who battle for everything. Like every ball, every loose ball, he will not give up on it. And we've had some proper lazy bastards at Sunderland over the year who've really not tried the best in a Sunderland shirt. And then you see Eliza Mayenda do what he does at the top end of the pitch. And then on top of that has added quality to his game. I just think he's for me, the standout pick. But Job does come very, very close.
Well, let's see how close, because at the moment we've got 2 for Job and 2 for Mayenda, Bomber, which is why I'm going to pick on you, because when you sent me through your picks, you actually went for Job as player of the year and Mayenda as your young player of the year. So I thought I'd try and twist your arm, because we're talking about Mayenda with the moments and Gav trying to redefine what is the young player of the year award, whilst also using Mike Beale terms like breaker-upper, of course. But in terms of saying what that young player is, like there is an element of Gav saying, well, is it most improved because he's come on the most? But Job has like I've been saying previously that I think he's been in there like a senior player rather than a young player. So I mean, you did pick Mayenda, but you had Job as your player of the year. So any switching up?
So Job, over the course of this season, I think is outstanding. And I make arguments for other players. And there is also, I guess, a logic to say, if you've got somebody as your player of the season and you're young enough to qualify for young player of the season, by some sort of default, they should also be young player of the season.
Absolutely.
However, my definition of the two is more aligned to Gav's. So player of the season is a person who has performed like the sustain the highest level of contribution to the course of a season. But there is also an argument that the player of the season is the person who's contributed the most significant contributions to the club's success, which is Eliza Mayenda. Now, for that very reason, Eliza Mayenda doesn't feature in my top 3 for player of the season, but because my alignment with the definition of young player is more towards Gav's in terms of a young player who's really broke through and is performing at the highest level and made so many significant contributions to the team's performance. I mean, if we're being frank, if we boil it down to it, there's every chance that we'll be playing championship football next season if it weren't for Eliza Mayenda. There is every chance of that. Just his impact alone, just over those 3 games. I was racking my brain about a definition. I ended up going to ChatGPT for it to say, how will you define a player of the season?
Wow. The lengths will go away. Just to try and talk us into the wrong decision. But the length will go on.
Yeah, I know. I'm determined to win this one, in the words of Gav. But yeah, I think I can see the logic. Joe Bellingham's my player of the season. Therefore, because he qualifies, he should be the player of the season. But because of my disagreeing the two and what for each, I'm going against logic. I would look to stick with Eliza Mayenda. At least is that in my head, at least, I can have Bellingham my player of the season. You might have to try to have.
I mean, Brett, are we having this? Because the redefining what the award is on Chat GPT here just to get around it.
No, and again, it does always literally boil down to how you see this award. Yeah, for me, it's of the season. It's not of the moment. It's not of 3 months. It's not who had. It is young player of the season. So, which Job, I think, is more than.
But what I would say, our season's completely different. Our season's completely different if it's not for Eliza Mayenda's contribution.
But based on that, you could actually say that Tom Watson should get it then, because our season's completely different without his contribution. and none of us are giving it to him. So.
Tell me Watson did it once. Eliza Mayenda done it 3 or 4 times over the course of the season, including all 3 playoff games. So that's my distinction between what's not Tom Watson. And also, I'm kind of contradicting myself to what I said about Joe Bellingham at the start. But the thing about us not winning when he's been out of the club, now that I've gone and looked at the fixture list, it becomes a little bit of a myth, because he also played 90 minutes when we lost away at Plymouth. He played 90 minutes when we lost to Stoke. He played 90 minutes when we lost to Coventry. And he played 3 lots of 90 minutes in the last 3 games of the season when we lost to Blackburn, Oxford and QPR. So it kind of myth busts that we don't win. Bellingham's not in team.
Nobody said we only win. I just said that when he came out the team, we didn't win. That's all I said. You can twist it however way you want.
That you sound very much like Rafa Benitez now, Chris. That is a fact.
Talking facts.
Absolutely. I didn't say anything incorrect. I mean, Gav, you're staying out of this and you're letting Bomber do all the work. I assume, that you're staying with Mayenda because of those moments and your new definition of what the award is.
I'm not. It's not a new definition. It's my definition. It's the one that I've chosen to adopt. We all have our own definition of what it means. No, I'm sticking with Mayenda, absolutely. I think his contribution has been greater than Job's in less games. And that's possibly why he gets ahead. And Bomber pointed out there, in all 3 playoff games, he's had significant contribution towards the end results and just given us so much. So yeah, I would say,
if Bellingham doesn't make that tackle against Coventry in the last few minutes, then we don't even get to Wembley. So
yep.
Yeah, he was quiet in the final though. He was quiet in the final where Mayenda sticks in the top bins. I'm not shifting on that opinion. Like, I think Mayenda had more of an impact in big moments, which we're not talking about. We're talking about best young player. That's it, yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
Well, there you go. There's a new definition. It's how the good will look after. Well, I don't think we're going to get a consensus. So I think Mayenda and Job have to step up to the plate and hold one handle of the trophy up and share the prize for young player of the season. But I mean, just talking about the players, I mean, I'll come to you, Brett, on this one, just in terms of the club's policy, because we've seen, we're talking about all these players and we forget how young they are. Bellingham came to the club 17 years old, went straight in the team. We're talking about Rigg, just about to turn 18, and he's been almost an ever-present. I played 30 games this season, 30-odd games. And, I was looking, and during the play of the season, I was looking, and we had people like Alexic being in 37 matchday squads this season. Young players that we're bringing in. Does going up to the Premier League, does that halt that a little bit? Does that mean that those players aren't going to get that experience on the bench where they might have? Because even Harrison Jones, 32 matchday squads he's been involved in this season. Does the Premier League slow that up a little bit?
It's going to be a really interesting question, that, because that is what the natural thought people probably say is that it might affect these players. One thing that we've seen this season though is Reggie Lebris doesn't tend to go to his bench too often anyway. And I think, although these lads were on the bench, they weren't always making appearances, or they might come in the last couple of minutes. It seems that we had quite a set first 11, and then maybe, then a 14 that were the choices. And then it was, these other lads making up those remaining slots on the bench. So I think it should be quite similar to that next season, where we're going to bring in some experience. Some players we obviously will go, but I still think there will be spaces for these players to develop. That is the model of the club. We still need these players, as time goes on, injuries, suspensions, we need these players to step up and make appearances. So they need to be in and around the match day squad. So I don't think it'll be too different, but it'll be, again, I think their chances on the pitch, will be more, limited.
Yeah. I mean, Bomber, how do you see that? Because I think I talked on the news roundup that we did. They're talking about bringing Jordan Henderson in, but we've got Triantis who's coming back from loan, who's a 22-year-old player who's been fantastic out on loan. So it's a tough balance to get when you bring these players in and you want to progress them on, but you're thinking about, do we need experience? So do you think Speakman will still prioritise the youth over those older players, do you think?
I think he will. I think ultimately we've got an identity at our club now and a structure and a model to use a model. I think we'll stick to that. But Speakman's history suggests that actually he does sprinkle a little bit of experience in amongst those youth players. If you think about Alan Brown, Corey Evans, those are the sort of players. It always tends to be in the middle of the park. So he does sprinkle some experience in the spine of the team. And I guess if you're losing, let's say you lose Alan Brown in the summer and you're gaining a Jordan Henderson, and then you lose Joe, there's still a space for Triantis, for example, in there. I do think we might have to adjust it slightly. It's a very fine pattern because, one, we still need to find the next Joe Bellingham, the next Eliza Mayenda, the next Dan Neil, the next Trey Hume. But equally, we need players who have experience that we can't afford to necessarily gamble on to keep us in the Premier League. So I think the core of the model in terms of we look for young, talented players that we can develop, or those like players who are talented but have lost their way a little bit, like the Enzo Lefebvres of the world. I still think that'll be our model, but we do need to sprinkle it or continue sprinkling it with a bit of experience in that spine. And like I said, I see a place in a world where we won't just see some of our superstars this season. It won't just be the Joe Bellinghams that will go. There'll be players who are on the fringes of our championship squad who are now probably surplus to requirements. Alan Brown is probably one of those. So yeah, there will be spaces. For the first time in a long, long time, I'm so excited to see like what we do in a transfer. I'm feeling of all the speculation and I'll be watching transfer deadline and everything else. But I think the other point that I would make is with our model, we kind of have to now align with what other Premier League clubs do. Other Premier League clubs bring in very done and own them to championship clubs to get that experience. We didn't have luxury to change ourselves. That avenue we take players who are quite ready Premier League, under the Chesterfield United, there's a world to get experience, but rather than promote it to get promoted and so I think after that mindset a little bit more, low championship Premier League is limited from what the championship to do it. I think it would do it, but Majesty Edition, the same.
Yeah. I mean, Gav, just quickly, because you've talked about all the players coming through from the academy, and we've got the likes of Matty Young and people like that, obviously looking for games when they come back. I mean, how do you think that's going to play out moving up to the Premier League? Does it make that job more difficult?
It would ordinarily, but given the way that the club has chose to act and perform in the last few years and given chances to kids, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see players blooded in. I think it depends on how good they are, doesn't it? Like Matty Young is at his age group an elite English talent, so whether he's part of the first team squad here or he gets a good loan, maybe even to the Championship, they're gonna have as David Priest said on the pod we did with him, they've got a roadmap for him very specifically. For somebody like Harrison Jones, who's a good player, but probably not in that category with Watson, Rigg, Job, etc., it's going to be very difficult to see where he gets games in a Sunderland shirt. I think what it does do, though, it gives, when you're a Premier League club, and particularly a Premier League club with a track record now of producing good young players, you're going to get better opportunities for them lads to go out. So even if they don't play for us in the Premier League, they're probably going to get a loan to a club where they wouldn't have got if we were a Championship team. Does that make sense? Like, Matty Young will probably get a Championship loan if we want to get him one. Harrison Jones will probably get a Championship loan or a top League One loan if we want to. Whereas in January, Harrison Jones was expected to go to Gateshead in the National League. So I think it's all very dependent on the player, isn't it? I think they're all going to get good opportunities regardless. The club aren't going to strangle talent. They're going to let them have opportunities, whether it's in a red and white shirt or it's somewhere else. And yeah, I think I'm not too worried about how many players get chances next year. I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in the summer. But there you have it. There's our Young Player of the Year. We couldn't split Job Bellingham and Eliza Mayenda. So please, if you listen to this, get in touch on socials or wherever and tell us that me and Brett were right, please. And the more people get in touch, the more we can rub it in Palmer's and Gav's face.
I'm taking this as a victory, by the way. So
take anything you can get.
Extra time, but after extra time.
But we couldn't split them, so it just shows kind of how good they've been this season. So, Brett, we'll let you dash off and go and see Kylie. Thank you very much, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I've got the wife literally standing at the door, like tapping her watch. So yeah, I need to make a move.
Brilliant. And Gav and Bomber, you can do one because you were simply wrong. Just basically. There's no other way of putting it. Always a pleasure, gents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, miss.
Cheers,
stuff. And thanks again for everyone for listening. We're going to have more on the 2024-25 season, goals and moments and all of that sort of swag. And we're going to have lots on the Roker Report website. I think we've got our season awards on there as well, so you can read all of that. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.